So, welcome everyone to our Inspiring Thoughts podcast today. Delighted to have with us Alex Thomas, and I've known Alex for many, many years, so we're going to get loads of good stuff from Alex today. Alex is a chartered independent financial advisor, doing exceptionally well in his career, and worked in many leadership roles over the time. So, Alex, great to have you on board.
Great. Thanks, Steve. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, and will it be Villa this year, going for the
Uh,
league, Al?
Look, I'm happy they're in the Champions League, so that's good enough for me. And let's see what this season brings.
Yeah.
In Emery, we trust.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed. Definitely. So, Alex has had questions in advance. So we're talking about authentic leadership today, which is wonderful. So, Al, would you just give people a bit of a flavour about your career? How have you got to where you are today, mate?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no problem at all. So look, I grew up in Warwickshire, and in a little village actually called Hall. So I know that causes quite a lot of amusement for you,
Yeah.
Steve, sometimes. So I left university and moved to London, and my first job was working for an insurance company, Pearl Assurance.
Yeah.
And I think that's quite important because I think that set quite a lot of grounding for my career later on.
Yeah.
That entailed looking at sort of general insurance, home and contents, etc. But it also meant that I was having to sort of knock on doors, etc.,
Yeah.
to sort of grow my business as well. But while I was doing that, I studied the financial planning certificate
Yeah.
and became a financial advisor. I then moved to a bank and sort of became sort of bank assurance advisor at
Yeah.
that point before moving across to another bank where I subsequently met you.
Yeah.
And I was a successful advisor for a number of years.
Yeah.
And then someone, quite close to us now took a bit of a gamble on me
Yeah.
and got me into leadership roles from there on in. So I worked in the sort of corporate environment, leading
Yeah.
bank assurance and financial services teams, and then into retail banking and
Yeah.
leading a sort of a retail banking team from there.
Yeah.
And then, so about 5 years ago, I left the bank and set up on my own as a financial advisor and
Yeah.
an independent financial advisor. And I now work for a company called DGS,
Yeah.
Chartered Financial Planners. And I've done that now for, about 5 years, really.
Yeah.
So been sort of growing my business since then.
Yeah, no, fantastic. And it's the bit I think about going back when you said about Pearl Insurance, how it was important. I always remember like my first job, and my first job was in Next PLC. I did it but it was a really good
Yeah, yeah.
starting point about making me grow up, the importance of work, setting the scene, those kind of things. And also, I know throughout your career as where you've got to, you've had to work hard to get where you are. You put a lot of effort in, a lot of high standards, a lot of long hours to get where you are, haven't you?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think that goes back to Pearl Assurance as well. I think at the time I was working really hard,
Yeah,
sort of moved down to London and, working hard, but having to like studying my exams off my own back to get to
yeah,
where I was. And I think that hard work ethos has always been sort of
yeah,
driven into me, I think, sort
yeah,
of from an early age and,
yeah.
looking at sort of building my career moving forward. And it's something, I have to do now as well to sort
Yeah,
of build my business and look after my clients.
yeah, and I think that bit there of like one of the first things about leadership, all the good leaders I know have really work hard. They put a lot of
Yeah.
effort in, they study hard, they work hard, etc., to get that reward and recognition. Being a leader isn't easy work, is it?
Oh, it's tremendously difficult, isn't it?
Yeah,
And I think, you learn on the job, you learn from
yes,
your mistakes a
yeah,
lot. But for me, there's no right or wrong way. There's no
yeah,
manual that you can just suddenly pick up and
yeah,
say, how do I act in this scenario?
yeah,
But for me, I think as long as you've got that work ethic and drive,
yeah,
and you're willing to sort of adapt to
yeah,
circumstances, then I think
yeah.
you'll be a success.
Yeah, and I love that characteristic there about drive. So I think that's one of my key traits around. People have got to drive forward the business, and you've got to drive yourself forward, your personal development, those kind of things,
Yeah,
to
yeah,
really elevate you. And I know within your industry about customer service, integrity, the advice that you give is super, super important, and that's that drive to delight your customers, isn't it?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And I think, I've been quite fortunate working in the environment I have been over the last
Yeah,
sort of 20 years, which is all focused around sort of customer experience.
yeah,
But, yeah, it's really, really important to understand what your clients want
yeah,
and, be proactive with them as well and
yes,
don't just sort of sit still.
yeah,
Because, I'd always advise my clients like I'm advising my parents, and I think
yeah.
that's really, really important.
Yeah, and I just love that phrase there about advising your parents because that gives you a great perspective, really, really good perspective. So, Al, we're diving to the question. So,
Yeah,
when you were growing up, kind of who inspired you as a leader, or kind of from that perspective, who made you kind of like get that mind thinking as a leader from an early age?
yeah, okay. So I've thought about this a lot, and there's probably not one or two particular people, but I think,
Yeah,
we've already spoken about sort of drive and hard work ethos, and
yeah,
obviously, your parents,
yeah,
probably everyone's parents inspire them, but I can
yeah,
remember, my dad, used to work really long hours,
yeah,
and I always remember that.
yes,
Him still being at his desk, etc., late at
yeah,
night. But I think sport has played, a massive role in my life.
yeah,
When I was
yeah,
younger, I used to swim, and I think,
yeah,
my parents used to be there all the time, taking me to the swimming pool, sort of
yeah,
9 times a week, dragging me out of bed at sort of 5 o'clock in the morning,
yeah,
and sort of taking me to the pool. And I think
yeah,
from then on, that sort of yeah, that developed that sort of hard
yeah,
work ethos in me and that drive.
yeah,
And I think when I sort of try and think of who inspires me, I think it's
yeah,
really topical at the moment with the Olympics on,
yes,
because Olympians, that I just think they're incredible. How
yeah,
they work so hard year after year
yeah,
in sort of amateur sports, that then they can peak at the right time at
yeah,
that 4 year period.
yeah.
And I watched, in terms of inspiration, I watched a documentary recently on Daley Thompson.
Oh, yes, yeah,
And it was absolutely incredible. I think a couple of things stood out for me for
yeah,
him was around his just sort of desire to be the best he could possibly be and pushing his
yeah,
boundaries all the time,
yeah,
year after year.
yeah,
But also what he used to do to just get the edge over the competitors and
yeah,
that psychological edge. So,
yeah,
so I think for me, in terms of inspiration, it's got to be, some of those
yeah,
sporting Olympians back in the day, and
yeah,
the rowers like Redgrave, and then
yeah,
Daley Thompson, and people like that.
yeah, yeah. And I just think it's fascinating about being the best that they can be, isn't it? And it is 4 years of hard graft, getting up early, late, the rain, the weather, that
Yeah,
kind of stuff, not
yeah,
being paid a lot to
yeah,
do it, and then but it's an optimum time to do it, isn't it? I think it's fantastic,
yeah,
and
yeah,
I think also about what you said about Daley Thompson, then about finding that edge, that psychological edge about improvement and etc. That keeps people just keep moving forward, isn't it? And
yeah,
I
yeah,
see a lot in business where people we speak to and from our organisations that we work with, we go in and say to people like, what are you doing, what are you working on, and they go, well, I'm just happy to be here. And I just think, well, actually, the skill set you've got now is not going to be the skill set you needed 6 months, a year.
yeah,
You're not
yeah,
constantly
yeah,
improving. It's not about career progression, but it's improving, isn't it?
yeah,
And that's
yeah,
what I see
yeah.
with those Olympians, constantly improving to move
And
forward.
they have to, don't they? Or
Yeah,
everyone will move past them as well.
yeah,
I think the other aspect of that is like humility. So,
yeah,
I really admire sports people who are really humble, and
yes,
and there was a situation like last week with the triathlon when our guy took over the New Zealand athlete on the line to sort of
yeah,
win the gold medal, and he sat down on the floor, and the New Zealand guy sat down,
yeah,
and sort of they embraced, and
yeah,
I thought that's fantastic,
yeah,
true humility and
yes,
sort of really good
yeah,
sportsmanship as well. And I think that's a really
yeah,
good sets a great
yeah,
precedent as role
yeah,
models for
yeah.
people in the future.
Well, I think that's the bit about role models. So if you think about people traveling to Paris, etc., they're seeing role models in the future and how they conduct themselves on the field and off the field, isn't it, or off the track? That's
Yeah, yeah,
super important. Whereas you can look at a variety of sports of how they're on the field or portray their personal integrity
yeah,
versus office contradicts their brand massively, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting, we've been watching the Olympics with my kids, and
Yeah.
my two girls are now sort of saying, "Oh, we want to try this sport or that
Oh,
sport,"
fantastic.
because they've seen,
Yeah.
how those athletes conduct themselves,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
the successes they're getting, and it's
Yeah.
brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I can see on your face how excited you
yeah.
are about it.
It's
So yeah,
good.
it's
Yeah.
really good, really good. So how would you, going back when we worked with each other, or even now,
Hmm.
how would you describe your leadership style? Because I think mine's definitely changed over the years and things like that. How would you describe your leadership style?
Yeah, we were talking about this briefly before, Steve,
Yeah,
weren't we? And I think I can remember getting my first leadership role,
yeah,
and I was like a rabbit in the headlights. I
yes,
just I
yeah,
wasn't I wasn't really clear in terms of what I
yeah,
needed to do. And I think the thing for me is you were faced with certain circumstances, and as I said, there's no guide that tells you what to do in that specific situation.
correct.
So I think you just learn and you
Yeah,
develop as you go. So I made loads of mistakes,
yeah,
throughout my early
yeah,
career in terms of
yeah,
leadership, moving forward. But I'd like to think I've developed my style over time.
yeah,
But I think there's a couple of things for me. I think the culture that you work in,
yeah,
does sometimes dictate the style of your leadership. Okay, so
yes,
yeah, I recall when I first started, it was a very sales orientated environment.
yeah,
So, I probably look back now and think, would some of my team have liked working for me?
yes,
I'm not
yeah,
sure, because
yeah,
of
yeah.
the
I've been there as
style
well.
and the
Yeah,
drive to
yeah,
always be the best, on
yeah,
that. But I think, moving forward, I think it's really important in terms of leadership to make
yeah,
sure your objectives are really aligned with the team. Okay,
yes,
and I think the biggest way that I feel I developed that over time is
yeah,
to build real synergy within the
yes,
team. Okay,
yeah,
so that involved, using people around me to
yeah,
develop ideas, listening and
yeah,
talking to, everyone,
yeah,
about, a collective goal,
yeah,
and then working towards that collective goal.
yeah,
So, whether that involved, setting up, people to champion certain aspects
yeah,
of the
yeah,
business or lead certain aspects of the business
yeah,
and understand what success looked like. I think that's what I developed over time.
yeah,
Um, and I think I'd like to say, towards the end, I showed a lot of empathy,
yeah,
and listened a lot to what
yeah,
people wanted from,
yeah.
the end goal.
Yeah, and I think it's when you started saying about the first 6 months, or when you first went into that leadership role, I found it incredibly daunting. Like the first big leadership role, I didn't know if I was sinking, swimming, didn't know what I was doing,
Mhm.
and I think the bit that I learned is I went surrounding myself with as many people as possible to talk to, either to reassure me to go, that's how I should
Yeah,
be
yeah,
feeling, or how do I get out of this, or how do I learn. And I think when you said about surrounding yourself about at the end with good people, you don't have to be brilliant at everything, do you? But you need to know those people that can
yeah.
help or aid, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And when I reflect back on, probably the last couple of years of working within the
Yeah,
bank, there's some exceptional people there
yeah,
who are better, uh, a lot, much better than me at a
yeah,
lot of things. So, why not harness that
yes,
and use those people to lead those areas and
yeah,
trust them and empower them to do that?
yeah, yeah,
And I think that's really key, sort of moving
yeah,
forward in leadership.
yeah. And I think also empathy, there, Al. I think empathetic leaders really understanding, not sympathizing, because I
Yeah,
think sympathetic leaders, then you get caught into kind of the bubble of problems and issues, etc. Whereas empathetic leaders about seeking to understand and then drawing it
yeah,
out and help those people find their ways. The best leaders I've worked with over the years have shown empathy, but empowered me to make
yeah,
decisions, learn by failure, and all that kind of stuff. They've been the best leaders rather than ones that have treated me like a child, if that
yeah,
makes
yeah,
sense.
yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
definitely, definitely. I think, if I look to the start of my career, did I have a lot of
yeah,
empathy? No,
yeah,
probably not. I think towards
yeah,
the end, I think that's where discretionary effort comes as well and
yeah,
builds. If you
yes,
look after people, and
yeah,
I think it's,
yeah,
that's really really important.
yeah. No, I think it's super. That discretionary effort is where that kind of extra 5, 10%, those kind of marginal gains take effect, and
Yeah,
people go, "Do you know
yeah,
what? I'm looking forward to work today," rather than, "Oh, do I have to do
yeah,
work
yeah, yeah.
today?" Yeah, definitely.
And you know what, Steve? I think that's what people remember as well. You
Yeah,
know, so I think um, you know, there's scenarios where maybe I've had meetings with managers
yeah,
and they were expecting me to react in a different way than I did,
yeah,
and you know, showing a bit of empathy, listening,
yeah,
etc. You know, it's been very positive on that
yeah,
relationship moving forward.
yeah,
So yeah, I think it's really important to sit, listen, and show
yeah.
that empathy.
Yeah, and we've talked about empathy as a really good trait as a leader. What would you see from your experience? What are good traits of leadership that you've seen or experienced?
Yeah, okay. So I guess there's probably there's a loads of traits, but probably three key
Yeah.
things for me. So the drive to
Yes.
succeed. Okay, so
Yeah.
um, you know, I guess what makes the best football managers and other business leaders the best
Yeah.
is that constant fire in the belly,
Yeah.
constant desire to improve,
Yeah.
always wanting more. You know, we spoke about like Daley Thompson earlier,
Yes.
but if you look at some of these football managers, you know, who
Yeah.
are year in year out succeeding, but they still want to do
Yeah.
more and do more. So
Yes.
I think it's that ultimately I always look at that. That's your fire in your belly. You know,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
if you haven't got that, and I think that leads into like you know, I looked at sort of Covey
Yeah.
seven habits of successful
Yes.
people, and I know that's something that you've gone
Yeah.
through as well, Steve. But I think the be proactive one for me
Yes.
is just so important. We've probably touched on it a
Yeah.
bit today, but
Yeah.
that personally really runs through me in terms
Yes.
of, you know, I can't sit still. I've got to go out there
Yeah.
and, you know, build my business, etc.
Yeah.
But I think the key thing is if you're not proactive, people will
Yeah.
just move around you. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think being proactive it can be used in different ways. You know,
Yeah.
whether that's if you take on a new role, really immersing yourself in the
Yeah.
detail, you know, and
Yeah.
knowing more than the next person, putting
Yeah.
yourself in difficult positions to go out your
Yeah.
comfort zone, because
Yeah.
that will build you as a person and build
Yeah.
that resilience
Yeah.
moving forward. So I think
Yeah.
being proactive and not sitting still is really,
Yeah.
really key
Yeah.
for leaders. And it's interesting because we talk about leaders we've worked for. You know, I've worked for some really proactive ones, and I've also worked for some who just tick the boxes.
Yes.
And yeah,
Yeah.
you know, they're not really inspiring for me. You
Yeah.
know, so
Yeah.
and then I think yeah, we've already touched on it. So the empathy one and sort of
Yeah.
listening to people
Yeah.
around you. You know, I think when you know when you start a new role, it's really important to speak to people who are
Yeah.
successful, etc. But
Yeah.
also listen and show
Yeah.
empathy to
Yeah.
to your colleagues. I think that's really really important to just so you can get the best out of those individuals.
Yeah, yeah, and I love it there about kind of referring back to Stephen Covey, like being proactive. The most successful people I've worked with or come across are proactive, and
Yeah,
it's not always when we talk about leadership. You don't have to be a leader to manage people. It can be a leader in your field.
mm,
So, like with that, the work that you do is a leader in the field, and it's how
yeah,
you're proactive in it, how you look after your clients, how you look after your customers, how do you understand the markets, how do you know what's
yeah,
going on in
yeah.
that field of work. That's about being proactive. It's not the person that does the most emails and copies everybody in. That's not being proactive. The
No,
bit is
no,
about how you show kind of your worth. I think
yeah,
that's super important, super important,
yeah,
especially in
yeah,
today's
yeah.
society, more and more, because there's more people that can do things quicker, faster, etc. But it's about the service you give and how you are with your clients that I think
Yeah,
are super important.
yeah, definitely. And I think any time I work with new clients or existing clients, you know, those
Yeah,
clients know that I'm always available at any time to sort of
yeah,
chat through. But I'll also touch base with those clients on a sort of
yeah,
a more than minimum basis, you know.
yeah,
So, and I think that's what differentiates,
yeah,
you know, maybe me from some others, but
yes,
you know, it's just really important to me, and it's in you know it's
yeah,
in my DNA really.
yes, yeah. And I think that's brilliant, isn't it? About actually how can I help, how I can support, what can I do? That's you looking at yourself first. I love working with people that look at themselves first and go, what can I do? Not what's other people's faults or failures, etc. I
Yeah,
find it really, really, and that's about being proactive, really looking at yourself.
yeah,
So how
yeah.
would you, over the years, and I know when we started younger as leaders and then we've moved through kind of our careers, how would you say you like handling pressure or stress? How have you kind of come
Okay.
to terms with that over the years?
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, do you know? I think I've probably struggled at times, and I
Yeah,
think there's probably been times, Steve, when I've called you and,
yeah,
back in the days and been
yeah,
stressed and struggled, etc. But I think over time you try and get
yeah,
mechanisms in place
yeah,
that support you
yeah,
a little bit, with pressure. And I think looking at it from if I was a leader now, thinking about helping other people with
yeah,
stress and pressure, I think it's just really important to sort of listen to people and get things in perspective. Yeah. So,
yes,
there's been examples in the past. One particular leader, she was absolutely fantastic, and I was really struggling. It was really tough. There was,
yeah,
every day, there was something negative
yeah,
impacting my mood, etc. I remember speaking to my leader at the time, and she did a great job of just getting things in perspective.
yeah,
Alex, you're not a brain surgeon. It's not
yes,
life or death, your job.
yeah,
And it's really important
yeah,
just to understand that what's the worst that
yeah,
can happen. And
yeah,
so I think that's really stuck with me
yes,
as a bit of a coping mechanism. And I think
yeah,
that's probably some tips for leaders out there who are,
yeah,
who are just thinking, oh, how can we help our
yes,
colleagues? Okay.
yeah,
But I think the other thing, so I guess on that, talk to people.
yes,
It's
yeah,
friends, family, peers, and what
yeah,
I've found over the years is speaking to peers and sort of family members,
yeah.
gives different views, and I think
So
that's
different
important.
viewpoint, isn't it?
Yeah, to
Yeah,
sometimes speak to someone who's not in the business is
yes,
really great. So,
yeah,
often I'd speak to my dad, I'd speak to my wife, I'd speak
yeah,
to my brother, I'd speak to, friends, and
yeah,
it just to get a bit
yeah,
of a view on it. But I think also, we alluded to it earlier, speaking to colleagues, those around you that you trust,
yeah,
is really, really
yeah,
important. I think it's so prevalent now with mental health,
yes,
that don't suffer in silence. Pick up the phone
yeah,
and speak to people, because
yeah,
that time out can be great. But I think a couple of other things, like just have a break.
yeah,
I think where sometimes when I find things are getting on top of me, I'll just have a break. I'll take the dog out for a walk,
yeah,
go to the gym, even just put on the telly, watch
yes,
TV for a bit and
yeah,
just get out of it.
yeah,
So that's a key thing. But I think the other thing that I often do is try to anticipate stressful situations.
yeah, good call.
So, I'm sure we've had it where we've got a big meeting coming up, and
Yeah,
it's quite stressful. So I often, if I'm working with clients, or seeing a new client, I try and anticipate what sort of
yeah,
questions they would ask, and then I make sure I'm, really
yeah,
gemmed up on that information so that I
yeah,
can deal with any outcomes at all. And you know what? You
yeah,
generally find you didn't even need to use that information.
yes,
However, you're in a
yeah,
stronger position as an individual having
yeah,
gone through that. So,
yeah,
so I think that's one of the other things that I
yeah,
probably pre-coping
yeah,
is that's what I anticipate as well.
yeah. And I love that because we work with clients around prevention and cure. So prevention, thinking about it, actually, I've got this high pressured environment. How can I be best well equipped?
Yeah,
Also, a
yeah,
bit of catastrophe management. What could go wrong? Questions I need to answer in my head. Those kind of. So I think it's a really good preparation to do with it to make sure that you kind of cut it off before you get there. I also noticed that when people say to me, "I wing things," they seem to have the most stress. Pure reason being it goes wrong, they get conflict issues, those kind of things. So you can see from that poor preparation part knocks
mm,
on. And I think, like with you, I've definitely learned if I've got a big decision to make, I try and sleep on it now. Whereas I am a strong activist, I like things done and I
yeah,
want to
yeah,
move on.
yeah, yeah,
Whereas I've definitely got to a bit of that's quite an important decision. Let me just sleep on it tonight.
yeah,
And then I'll look at fresh mind tomorrow. And that's definitely helped me. And I think the last bit to pick up there, that fresh perspective, I've definitely looked at over the years to get more MI or data or evidence to validate it.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that's not always like data, but actually, what did I hear? What did I see? Is that true? Do I understand that, or have I just made it up?
Yeah.
From that
Yeah.
perspective, I think it gives you that real clarity, doesn't it?
Yeah, oh, definitely, definitely. I think, you talk about what if scenarios, and we,
Yeah,
as an advisor, I use what if scenarios with
yeah,
clients. So,
yeah,
what if the markets drop? What if this? And we use
yeah,
like tools to support with that.
yeah,
But I think anticipating questions like that,
yeah,
is great, and it prepares you. But I think to your point as well about around reflecting on stuff, I think, in the early days of leadership, I'd fire
yeah,
back emails or
yeah,
whatever. But I think it's really important just to sit back sometimes, reflect, and
yeah,
just take some time out to sort of think about what that looks like.
yeah,
And if that means you don't send a response back, as soon as possible, then that's fine.
yeah,
And it's just making sure that you
yeah,
give the balanced
yeah,
response on that. So yeah.
yeah. And I think I love the word balance there, because I definitely, I think when I got to about probably like mid to end 30s, I start to feel comfortable in my own skin. I could go to people, well, no, this is the balance of it. And I definitely try now, especially with clients that we work with, walk in their shoes, what's going through their mind, how's it going on in
Yeah.
their life, what can they see, what can't I see, what do I need to understand? Definitely allows it just to be a nice atmosphere, and it becomes less judgmental, just more relaxed, but it reduces that stress or pressure pot, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so important, isn't it, to see
Yeah,
other people's, map of the
yeah.
world, as they call it.
So Al, if we kind of look back over your career and go back in time, when we were both younger, etc., what three tips would you give yourself to help that person in their career? What would you say to them?
Yeah, okay, cool. So I think definitely the first one would be immerse yourself with the role,
Yeah,
immerse yourself with the detail,
yeah,
but also immerse yourself with successful people and learn what they're
yes,
doing. Yeah. So
yeah,
so not I always remember when I was an area director in the bank, and
yeah,
I think the best thing I did at the time was sort of go and spend time with other
yeah,
directors and pick up
yeah,
different traits from them.
yeah,
Yeah, I think it's really important to
yeah,
understand that. And I think if you've got a great culture where
yeah,
people are sort of happy to share
yeah,
with you, then that really, really helps. I'll
yeah,
give an example now. Where I work now with DGS, it's fantastic. There's lots of advisors here. If I come
yeah,
across something that I'm not 100% on,
yeah,
we work together. I can speak to
yeah,
people, and so we share ideas. And I think that's really important to
yeah,
find. And on the back of that, it's then getting a winning formula for you and
yes,
sticking to it.
yeah,
So don't change it every week.
yeah,
Just be really consistent in that message.
yeah,
The second thing leading on to that is what we touched on earlier: create synergy in the team.
yes,
So give that responsibility to your team
yeah,
to sort of lead things, look at what their strengths are,
yeah,
and mobilize them in the right way
yeah,
to support the collective goal and the
yeah,
collective vision. So use those around you, because it's
yeah,
impossible as a leader to do it on your own. The
great,
more
yeah,
the more people you've got singing with you, the better.
yeah,
Okay. And then the final one, I think, would be something I learned later on in my career, and sort of something I really sort of
yeah,
stick to now, is just be yourself.
yeah,
It's sort of, I think sometimes when you go into a role, I probably found it quite overwhelming at first,
yes,
being a leader of,
yeah,
100 people in an area,
yeah,
etc. But I think so you sort of try and be something to everyone. But I think
yeah,
what's really important is, your true self only comes through
yeah,
if you're really true to yourself and you be
yes,
yourself. So
yeah,
it's really important. What you see is what you get.
yeah,
And I think don't try and change who you are, because I think the reason you're there is
yeah,
someone saw something in you that they really
yeah,
liked, and
yeah.
so develop that, and don't try and be
Yeah.
someone you're not.
Yeah, I think they're really good, wise words around surrounding yourself with people, more successful, really get that kind of great ideas. And you said you've got that now. I found that as well, Alex, leaving the bank working with people that don't want things back from you. They just want to help. It's
Yeah,
just a
yeah,
lovely world,
it's
really
great.
great world.
It's
And you
brilliant.
help each other and kind of, from that point of view, really find that kind of fascinating, enjoyable. I think one of the things that I was thinking about the other day, what would I give advice back to myself when I first become a leader, is about setting boundaries early.
Yeah,
I remember the first leadership job I took on was I thought I've got to be accessible 24/7.
yeah, yeah,
And I think, and then people took advantage of that goodwill and good nature from that point of view. And I always remember my wife saying to me, we were on holiday once, and she said to me, "Are you away with me or your BlackBerry?"
yeah, yeah,
And I
yeah.
thought that was
Interesting.
quite true. That
Yeah,
actually, and she said, "Well, if you treat them like adults, they'll cope." And I thought that really dawned on
yeah,
me
yeah,
around
yeah,
setting boundaries, clear things, first of all. But I think lots of stuff that you've said there, I totally resonate with
yeah.
from that point of view.
It's interesting, isn't it? When we first got Blackberries, because I
Yeah,
can remember I lived in London then, and
yeah,
yeah, I was replying to emails constantly,
yeah,
and then probably like you, I got to the point where I was like, I'm not going to take this on holiday. I'm on holiday, and
yes, yeah,
and that was a bit of a dawning moment, really. You sort of think,
yeah,
actually, yeah, that people can cope without you, and
yeah.
it's, but more importantly, you need that switch off time as well.
Correct. Yeah, you need that breathing space, that thinking space. I think more so as well, I've noticed in kind of the roles we've got our own companies, that I need that quality time just to think, right, where are we going next? What are we
Yeah,
doing? How are things going?
yeah,
From that point of view, like that, you constantly like innovation part. Whereas when you're in the thick of it, you don't get that breathing space, is it, to
no.
really kind of do some good thinking?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely,
Yeah.
definitely.
So, a question we always get asked, Al, to bring us finish up today. What are you currently working on this year, 2024? What's a big goal for Alex or personal development for you this year?
So, I think for me now, I don't really sort of lead teams. So
Yeah,
I employ someone. So, I
yeah,
think for me, it's about bringing what we've spoke about today to
yeah,
life and sort of just developing that
yes,
relationship with that person,
yeah,
and I sort of spoke to them about, how we interact. And I
yeah,
think it's really important that you treat them as an individual. And
yeah,
I don't see my relationship with that person as
yeah,
I'm the boss, and that, we're on
yeah,
a par. It's really
yeah,
important that happens.
yeah,
So, but I think the other stuff from a self-development perspective, I think it's more around, I became a chartered financial planner earlier in the year.
yeah,
I've built on earlier exams to do that, and
yeah,
that was a really proud moment for me to
yeah,
do that. So I think for me, it's about enhancing technical knowledge,
yes,
sharing, ideas with advisors where I work
yeah,
now as well. And I think sort of just building my client base and network,
yeah,
um, so to speak, but whilst holding that sort of family mantra of
yes,
advising,
yeah,
sort of moving forward. So,
yeah,
so I think for me, we spoke about it earlier. You forever learn as an advisor, because
yeah,
it's really important to understand current markets and
yeah,
providers in the market, but also, for me, it's being the best you can be with clients to help them with that
yeah.
financial journey as well.
Yeah. And I think the bit to pick up there, so like with your studies and getting your chartered position, you've worked incredibly hard over the years to get where you're at, and then you've studied
Yeah,
exceptionally well. Also alongside a family, being husband, dad, those kind of things.
yeah.
All that is about effort. If you want to be successful, you've got to put the effort in, isn't it?
Oh
That's
yeah.
super important.
Oh, without a doubt, without a doubt.
Yeah.
I think I've seen people in the past who, become self-employed, and I think they, oh yeah, will just be self-employed because it
Yeah.
sounds nice, and we'll play golf
Yeah.
and we'll do this. If you're successful, as you well know, Steve,
Yeah.
as a self-employed person, it's hard work,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you've got to develop business, develop relationships, but then
Yeah.
you have to do the day job as
Yes.
well.
Yeah.
Okay, and I came into this as self-employed because I wanted to naturally spend a bit more time with my kids and
Yeah.
juggle that. And me and my wife have to juggle all the time, but
Yeah.
it's great. I'm massively driven you know, to build that success, but
Yeah.
whilst making sure I spend time with my family as well, because I think that's what it comes back to. That's really important.
Yeah, no, fantastic. So, Al, this has been great today, and I know you and I like to chew the cud and have a good natter, so I could
Yeah,
be
yeah,
here
it's
for
been
get here for
great. Thank
days.
you. Thanks for the
So,
invite.
the question is, how can people get hold of you, connect with you? What's the best way to reach out to kind of hear from you a bit more?
Yeah, fine. So look, I'm on LinkedIn, social
Yeah,
media.
yeah,
You know, my if people are looking for some advice, they can, you know,
yeah,
drop me an email,
yeah,
at@dgsifa.com. But all of
yeah,
that is on LinkedIn anyway.
yeah, fab.
So, you know, people can reach out via LinkedIn, which is probably the best
Yeah,
platform for sort of people
yeah,
to reach
yeah.
me.
Yeah, and just to echo, because I've known Alex for many, many years, fantastic at his job, really knows what he does, makes people feel really, really reassured. So I would reach out to Alex and just have a chat and get to know him. But he can do a lot of good stuff, kind of help your wealth and finances. So, Alex, can I just say a big, big thank you today? Really appreciate you coming on our Inspiring Thoughts podcast. Wish you all the very best for the rest of the year, which I know you'll grow your success. But just a huge thank you for coming on today, mate. Really appreciate it.
I really enjoyed it, Steve. Thanks ever so much for inviting me. Really
Lovely.
appreciate it.
Cheers, and
Cheers.
Alex. Thanks ever so
Thanks.
much.
Bye.
Bye.